So we're going to continue our discussion of business and politics from a history perspective. So the thing that you need to take note of is that the American Revolution was an economic war. The goal of the American Revolution was to free the colonies from the economic yoke that the British Empire had imposed on it. The British Empire dictated mercantilist policies that the colonists were expected to abide by. So the colonists had to trade exclusively with Britain, they had to pay British taxes, and of course they had to more or less be trading in raw commodities that they could send to Britain to be turned into finished goods. So the American Revolution was really about freeing up business policies or economic policy in the colonies. And of course, economic historian Charles Beard once even said that the Constitution was really just an economic document drawn up to protect the interests of the propertied middle and upper class members of the new country. And what we'll notice is up until the time of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or excuse me, after the drawing up of the Constitution, up until the time of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, business enjoyed a great degree of ascendancy and power over American politics. Now in the early America, most of the economy was agricultural. In fact, it was about 90% agricultural, so farmers and planters were the economic elite. But then Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton thought that industry should be promoted, and he succeeded in promoting industry predominantly in the coastal areas of the new America. And as America's economy expanded, political power of business also grew rapidly. This actually came to a head following the Civil War, which was the period of Reconstruction. And that was basically that businesses, with the support of the Union Army, were allowed to reappropriate the economic assets of the South as they saw fit. So it was almost unfettered business power in the Reconstruction of the South. And following the election of Ulysses Grant all the way up to McKinley, business enjoyed a golden era. In fact, it became so bad with businesses calling all the shots in politics that the United States Senate was called the Millionaires Club. And in response to this perception that business controlled everything in politics, we had, as I mentioned in our business history lecture, groups like the Populist Party, the Progressives, the Anti-Saloon League, Organized Labor. These were all groups trying to check the power of business. Populists through agricultural reform, Organized Labor, of course, trying to check the power of businesses with regards to their exploitation of labor, and of course the Progressives who thought that government should take a more dominant role in regulating businesses. So the Progressives again were trying to get government to expand its power to regulate those businesses. Also, big businesses fought suffrage of women. They didn't want women to have the vote because they thought that women would vote in such a way that would be against business interests. Now, this kind of ascendancy of business became called into question with the advent of the Great Depression. The Great Depression was in many ways caused by excessive business practices and, quite frankly, greed. And once the Great Depression hit, it became apparent that businesses could not solve this problem, and the government at that time did not have the tools to correct it either, until the election of Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1932. Now, he began to try to regulate corporations, which they fought against him tooth and nail. They didn't want him to regulate the banking industry. They didn't want him to regulate manufacturing industry. They didn't want him to recognize the right of labor unions to organize, and they didn't want him to enact Social Security. However, public sentiment was generally in favor of the New Deal because it was seen as a way of protecting the common people. The lasting legacy of FDR, or Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was that government should intervene in business to make sure that through this interference in business, the flaws of capitalism could be corrected. So it was that government was predominant over the economy, not business dictating the terms of the economy to government. However, the 1940s began to see a resurgence in the power of business. Businesses were seen as the bulwark of the American economy and helped America win the Second World War. And this kind of positive business sentiment continued throughout the 1950s. However, as I've mentioned during our business history lecture, the 1960s and 70s began to see societal groups question the right or the power of business in government and society. In the 1960s, of course, we began to see a changing political landscape due to pressure from societal groups that were demanding consumer rights, they were demanding environmental protection, they were demanding taxpayer protection, civil rights, and also the Vietnam War. And these groups and their interests have stimulated a wide number of government agencies to be born and to grow further, which is what we're going to talk about in the next video. I'll see you then.